Hello and welcome to the React lecture series. In this coding demo, we'll create the another route for information retrieval. So we are going to do this route where the information will come by a specific ID or specific unique ID. Say, for example, here we'll send a student ID and we'll retrieve the specific student if the student is there, and then we'll render it. Okay. Okay, so let's go to VS Code. So here, that's we did so far. So that's we completed our student component, and then we'll do the student details. So right now you can see that, okay, this is basically, if you refresh, that this is, it shows all the students from our MongoDB database. Now, if I want to see for a specific student, so it shows no such student is found, is because this part is not connected with our database. Okay, so let's go and do that. Okay, so we can start with our backend. Okay, so let's see that what is the current situation with our backend. Okay, so that's our backend, and then we need to go to student routes, and then so that's we also need to create that route as well. Okay, the ID route, so that if I go for a specific student, so that we can get it. So let's create that route. So let's copy this one and then add the new route here. So we can create so like get a student by ID. Okay, so say that if you give the ID and so we need to extract the student ID. So write constant, we can say ID equal to request dot parents dot ID. Okay, that's how we will send as an ID. So we'll extract that information. Okay. And then we will, when we search, we'll search by ID. So we can, there is a function in Mongoose also called find by ID. So we can also use that and then just pass the ID that's we just extracted from the request. And then we say if there's no response, then it says student is not found. Otherwise, we'll send the response, and then so it's pretty much same. So we just need to add this condition. Okay, so we can quickly check that whether this one is working since server so our web server is running. So we can quickly check that let's say that if we send a request for a student which is exist in the database. So let's say that if I search, and then we can see that whether this one can return. Okay, so whether this route is working or not, we are checking that. So we know that it is basically localhost 3000, right? And then we created API students, so it basically shows everything. Now if I pass a specific ID, and then it's giving me the information. Okay, so that's how the information will be passed. Okay, so that means this route is working. Okay, now we need to fetch this one. So you see that backend is super easy. You don't need to do too much. So we are done with the route at the backend. So let's go, and mainly we need to do at the front end part, right? So first we'll start with the helper function. So we need to create a helper function which basically find a student with specific ID. So we say get students by ID, and then let's say that we pass an ID, and then here we'll fetch by ID. So this is our API endpoint. So we'll say, okay, so we need to add a string literal, because we need to write /, and then, okay, so we need to get the value of the API endpoint, since this is not, otherwise it will become a complete string. So we write a $sign here, And then we also get the $ of the student ID. That's we are sending from our component. Okay, so now it should search for a specific student, whatever the ID you are passing, and then you return the response. We will export getStudentById. Okay, so that's the so now we can export this named export, and then we can. So this is our getStudentsById function, and then we are exporting this one, the named export. Now we need to import this from our student details component, which we need to modify. So right now we have this one. We previously extract the information from a file. That's our local sample students. So we need to change it. So now we need to connect with the database, right? So so we'll take the helper function for that. So let's import that fetch student. What is the name of the function? Okay, so the helper function name was get student, right? So let's get students by ID. Okay, so yeah, we can write get student by ID instead of get students. So let's change this one, because it's by ID, it should be one student, not more than one. So right, get student by ID. And then here we also can change it to get student by ID. Okay. So now, so we need to send the ID, so which will come from the parameters. So when we click a student, right? So if I see here that when you click any student, then is basically, okay, so we need to complete this, otherwise we'll get an error, right? So when you click a student, we basically send an ID for that route. So we'll extract that one. Okay, and then we don't need to, because this is an object form, so we don't need to convert to the integer, right? Because that's the MongoDB ID. Yeah, let's create some hook. So we write input instead, okay, from React, and then also without useEffect. Okay, so and then we'll initialize here those. It's almost same what we did in the student component. So here we'll also create a couple of initialization. So okay, let's do this one. So we'll say constant student. Okay, so that's the students. That's our variable. It will be an object type variable where we want to put the student information. So write set student. Okay, and then we write useState, and then we'll write null. Okay, so that's our initialization for a student object. And then we can also write the other two. One is the error message, that when you try to fetch a student and get an error, and we want to render that error for the user. So we write set error message, and then we write useState, and then we'll say that initially is an empty string. And then also we want to write is loading. Okay, and then write set is loading. And then we write useState. And then we'll say this is initially false. Okay, so that's our initialization, and that's the parameter we are fetching. So now we need to call the useEffect, and then useEffect will call the student, right? So we'll call that getStudentById function through the useEffect. So let's so this was our previous one. Now we need to change it. We need to modify it. So we write useEffect, and then useEffect will have a callback function, and then the array, the second optional argument. And then here we are passing the ID. So it means that if the ID is changed, or we click to new ID, so it will work in that way, okay? So it will trigger this function. So here we call our asynchronous function since we are going to call another asynchronous function. So write asynchronous function and I write fetch student by ID. And then here I'll define it. And then we will basically call this function here. So you write fetch student by ID. So we'll call this function here. And then here is our function definition, okay? So we will initialize our state, okay? Before going to fetching the information, we can initialize our previous memory. So we can write set student is now, okay? And then we write set error message is empty. And then we write set is loading. This time it will be true since we are going to fetch, okay? So we are going to call the function is getStudentById. So that's function we are, and then we pass the ID that's which actually extract from the parameters of the URL. And then we'll assign this value to a constant variable response, okay? And so when you get this value response, okay, then we need to check if the response is okay. So we say if response dot okay, okay, so if this is okay, then we'll do something else, we'll do other thing, okay? So else we can set the error message, right? So we can write that the response was not successful or something. So we write set error message. We say that response or the student is not found. Student is not found, okay? So that's the else statement. And here we'll see that if the student is, we found it, then we need to get the student. So we write constant result is response dot JSON. Okay, so we got the JSON. So we extract the JSON format and then write set student as the result. Okay, so that's our useEffect function, okay? So useEffect, the definition of the useEffect is that inside the useEffect, we have a callback function. And then inside the callback function, we define the fetch student by ID, which basically reinitialize all of our control variable. And then we call the helper function, get student by ID, passing the ID. And then we check if the response is okay, then we will do the await. Okay, so that's the await keyword. Response.json, and then when you get the result, and then we'll say set result. Otherwise, we'll say student is not found, that's our error message. So now come here and then rendering, okay? So student details. So you are checking that if student is not null condition, okay? So object.entries, so this is basically, since the student is an object, so we use object.entries, it will convert to a nested array. So that's why we use the map function. And then each inner array will have key and value pair. So the key is the property and the value is the value. So now here is an interesting thing. So if you see that if this is an object and you want to extract the information, so each of them is an property and the value, right? So this is a property, this is the value, this is the property and the value, okay? So these are fine, but problem is this one, since this is an object, okay? So we need to, if you want to display some object information, then we need to stringify, okay? So we need to convert to a string. So we can write like this, okay? So we write if, so that's our key, right? The value, if the value is an object, so we can check this condition here, okay? So that's so we want to display the key and the value. Okay, but value can be an object. So we can write value, whether the value is an object. So we can write type of, right? So type of value is an object. Okay. So if it is an object, then we are checking, is this an object? If it is, then we render certain thing. Otherwise, we will just render just whatever the value is. That's we'll render. Otherwise, we'll render the JSON dot stringify, right? JSON dot stringify function, and then has the value. Okay, so if the value is set from an object, so we'll stringify. Otherwise, we'll just display as it is. Okay. So here you see that so we are rendering two things. One is the key, which is the property. So here we have the properties, the department is the property. So and then we give a colon, and then we want to display the value, okay, as it is. But when we have basically if there's an object, okay, so for example, this is an object, ID is an object in MongoDB, okay, so we cannot just display like the other string or number, okay, so we need to convert to a string. So that's what it has been done here. We are checking that if the type of value is an object, then we'll convert to a string. Otherwise, we'll just display as it is, okay. And then here we can, instead of this, we can just show that if the student is empty, we can just display the error message, okay. So whatever the error message we have set here, okay. So now let's see that whether this thing is now properly connected and is working, okay. So so we'll go for a localhost 8080, right? And then it shows the students. And then student shows the student, and then this is a specific student, and it shows the information that whatever the information it has. So for example, and then we added the Jackson like in the previous video, and then Jackson shows this, okay? So it's basically the students which the ID is linked here, and then it basically extract the information by the ID when we are clicking to a specific student, okay? So if you want to see that, okay, if you add a new student in the database, we can quickly check that. So insert a new student. So let's say that we add a student. Name is, say, Maria. Say a GPA is say 4.0. Okay, and let's say that we also add the department as CSE, computer science and information system. Okay, not CSE, CSNIS. Okay, so we insert it, and now it shows this. Now let's see that if you try to see the students, and now you added a new student, Maria, and you click, and it shows that this is the information, the details information, okay? So I'm also, I basically display all the information, not some specific information. So that's why we are writing this way, right? Object.entry. So, is the raw information. When you want to display, you have you can check which you want to display and which not, okay? But this is an important thing. When your value is an object, okay, so you cannot just display like this, okay? If you try to, you'll get an error, okay? So you need to convert to a string, okay? So either this way or using toString method to convert into a string. Okay, so this is the route working for a specific ID, right? So you see that we are calling the student details component from the front end in the app.js. Okay, so in the app.js, you see that we actually register this route with the element student details. So when you basically click into this route, it's actually called the student details. So that's why we actually wrote the code in the student details. And now it is giving us the response based on the student ID. Okay. So I'll also upload this portion that's we just did in the GitHub repository. Okay, and see you in the next lecture where we can do the other complete routes. Okay, so where we can update the student or delete a student and then also searching. Okay, so those are the things. And then we will do the corresponding changes both at the front end and the back end, that what we have done in here. Okay, so see you in the next video and thank you very much.